Okay, this lecture I'm calling Chapter 11 Extra Material. This was some material that I feel was pretty important, that when Cisco went from version 5 of the curriculum to version 6 of the curriculum, that they removed for whatever reason. But I think it's important things for you to be aware of. The first deals with router and switch file systems. We have touched on the different types of memory and file systems that are in the router, but I think it's important to realize that some of the memory in the router is flash memory. We also have what they call network file systems that exist somewhere outside or off the router or switch. And in our case, it would be an FTP file server, or more likely a trivial FTP file system. And then there are other file systems within the routers and switches that you can read and write, which are the NVRAM, the running configuration file, read-only memory, and some of the ones that we talked about before. Now, on most file systems, you have a concept of, this is a text file, this is an executable file, this is a binary file, that type of thing. So in IFS, we do have text files, which would be like a copy of the running configuration, for example. What they're calling image files are binary files that contain iOS images for various network devices that you might have. And these file systems, you're able to move around to them or through them, similar to what you would a file system on a computer. So here we're on a router, and we can say show file systems, and it's going to list a whole bunch of types of file systems. At this point, we have NVRAM, and we have a flash drive plugged into slot 0. And it's telling you how big they are as far as how much space is in use and how much is free. You add those together and you're going to get the total capacity of the device. Just like we can do from an MS-DOS command prompt on a Windows machine, we can issue the dir, which is a directory command, and it's going to show us all the files. The names are over to the right. It's going to tell them when they were last modified and how large they are and what permissions you have to them. So we can read and write all of these files if we're in privileged exec mode. We can CD, change directory around, again, just like we do on the MS-DOS command prompt. We have a pwd command. That's a Unix command. I think Windows has it as well, that tells you where your current directory is. So in this case, we're on the NVRAM at the root or top level directory. We can do a directory just like we did before, and we have some configuration files, and down at the bottom looks like a security certificate. A moment ago I said most likely we would use TFTP. The reason being is because we can use a trivial FTP server to back up and restore configuration files from our router, so that if something happens and you need them back. So what you do is, we've had copy run start. We've seen that a lot. So here we have copy run TFTP. So down at the bottom is what would happen when you type that. The first thing it would do is ask for the remote host name. So here the person's entered the IP address. It will ask the name of the file that you want to write, and then it's going to confirm that yes, you want to write the file Tokyo.2 to the trivial FTP server at 131.108.2.152. And if you say yes, it'll tell you that it's writing it. It will periodically print exclamation points to show you that it's actually doing something. And then we'll tell you OK once the copy is completed. To restore a file, you reverse the first two arguments. So you want to copy from the remote trivial FTP server to your running config on whatever device you're logged into. It's going to ask you for the IP address. It's going to ask you for the name that you want to copy, and then you press enter and it's going to go through and copy the file down. On one of the early slides, we saw that we could have USB flash drives. This is the back of a router, and they've highlighted two USB ports. And what you can do is you can plug those in and use them as secondary storage. Most of the routers will support 64, 128, and 256 flash modules. Some of the newer ones may support larger, but those are relatively small compared to today's standard for just a generic USB flash drive that you might use on a computer. But that's all the space you really need. There's not going to be a lot of stuff that you're storing. As far as format, you're going to have to format those as a FAT16. That's an older protocol. That's the original file allocation table scheme that was used on floppy disk years ago. Only allows you to have, I believe, 255 files on the device. More modern computers, if you're not using NTFS, most flash drives are going to be formatted FAT32. Which is a newer format, but nonetheless Cisco devices require FAT16 formatting. So here we have flash drive in. I did a DIR USB flash 0. The second flash port would be USB flash 1, and right now it tells me that it just has one Cisco iOS file on it. So as far as doing backup and restore to a USB drive instead of trivial FTP like we saw before, here I'm doing a show file system. Notice that the router has flash at flash 0. It has NVRAM, and down at the bottom is the USB flash, which is the flash or flash drive that's plugged into the USB port on the device. If we want to copy our running config to the flash drive, we just say copy running config to USB flash 0 : and it will verify or ask you for the name. So you can say, oh, this is the router 1 configuration, and then it copies it. If that file already exists, let's say you made a backup of router 1 previously, and you've made some changes and you're happy with the changes and that's what you want to use in the future, then what you could do is you would do the copy command, enter the file, but you're going to get a warning that that file already exists and ask you, do you really want to overwrite it? And if you do, then you say yes, and it copies the new file. Now we're doing a directory on the flash drive. You'll see that we have a directory called Cisco, and then we have our r1.config file that we just copied up. We can actually use the more command to give it a full path to a file, and what that's going to do is type out the contents of the file. That in this case, the file is named r1-config, and it's on USB flash 0. So if you want to look at what the file is, you can simply do that from the flash drive. So some information about file systems and backups and restores, again, that I felt were important for you to at least be aware of.